Tennessee looks like the better team. Shoot, Vegas says they're 10 or 11 points better than Florida. Can you believe that? On the other side, history says the Gators, wow, 16 out of 17 in recent memory here. Charlie Burris is on the line, Big Orange Podcast. Check him out and everybody else there on the Big Orange Podcast. Charlie, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's the most nervous week of the year for Tennessee fans. This is so we're smack in the middle of it, and I'm as scared as ever, especially being a favorite like that.
If somebody asked me to give the line on this game, and I'm usually pretty good about this, I can usually come within a half point to a point on these point spreads, but before I look at them, I wouldn't have thrown out 10 or 11. I would have thrown out like 6.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are having a little bit of recency bias with this USF game for Florida and how quickly we've forgotten that they did also beat Utah. It was an ugly win, and realistically, a half decent throw from Utah's quarterback is a loss for Florida, but at the goal line there. But nonetheless, they gave it to Utah there, and I do think this: if both teams play clean games, it's close and Tennessee wins. If Tennessee plays a clean game and Florida doesn't, it's a blowout win for Tennessee. And I think if Florida can really muddy the waters and get Tennessee making mistakes and shooting themselves in the foot like they have in so many years past, that's where I get really worried about this game. Is can Tennessee play clean? And so far in the season, that's been a tall task. That game against Pittsburgh should have been a blowout win. With just a few minutes remaining in that fourth quarter, Pittsburgh was punting the ball back to Tennessee. If Tennessee scores a touchdown on the ensuing drive, they would have been up by 14 points, and it would have just pretty much ended that way. But instead, it's a muffed punt, and Pittsburgh gets the ball back. They, in a really short field, they score a touchdown, tie the game, go to overtime, blah, blah. Tennessee did ultimately win. But if Tennessee can avoid things like that, in my opinion, this is a win. An 11-point win, a 10-point win might be pushing it. History says throw those stats out the window. And any of that logical thinking that comes along with stats and things. Get rid of that. But, if you are talking on paper, Tennessee's definitely a favorite here. Anthony Richardson hasn't thrown a touchdown pass all season, and he kind of looks lost a lot of the time. So there is that factor too when you consider Florida. But this hype makes me nervous. I would be lying if I said it didn't.
Charlie, muffed punts, fumbles, a ton of penalties aside, meaning a clean game. The one guy that seems to be responsible for the football and plays a clean game just about every time. I saw a stat the other day, 2 interceptions in his last zillion games is, of course, Hendon Hooker. It was a 42-2 ratio that I saw in a period of time. I know he was at 31-3 last year, one of the best rates in the nation. And here he is still taking care of the football.
It's really been remarkable. It comes a decent amount from the system. Josh Heupel very adamantly does not put the ball in danger just because of how destructive it is when you turn the ball over in his system. I mean, you're already by nature giving the other team so many chances just because Tennessee scores so quickly, goes so fast. You're already going to give them a ton of chances. You can't give them extra ones. I mean, it just is so important. And so he basically has this system set up where the quarterback, the bulk of the time, never really puts the ball in danger. It's easy screen passes, big throws over the top where you're essentially putting the ball either in your receiver's hands or nobody gets it, and some situations like that. I think there's been a problem with converting on third downs, and I think it comes from the fact that Heupel and I would say by extension Hooker, they don't want to put the ball in danger at all, so they don't pass a lot in that mid-range middle of the field. That's pretty rare. It does happen, and they've been successful at it, but they don't want to put it there in the middle with all the action. They're trying to kind of avoid that to make sure that the ball doesn't get turned over. And so on third downs, like third and long, when you need probably 9 yards to get to the sticks. They're hesitant to do that. And so it has its drawbacks too. It's not as simple, I think, when I look at it. It's not just as plainly simple as, yeah, he hasn't thrown any interceptions. It's been very purposeful. It's been very purposeful from Hooker and the coach. And I wish they would almost take more chances, but then I look at the system and I kind of go like, I get it. You really don't want to turn the ball over when you're playing like this. So it's a two-edged sword, I would say.
Yeah, if you're running the ball as effectively as Josh Heupel wants to run the ball and as effective as they were last year, and your TD to pick ratio is 31-3. Yeah, there is a fine balance for most teams that are going to be successful, like first-rate teams, between explosiveness and efficiency, and taking a risk-reward approach to it. So I did see most of the Pitt game, and what hit me was that if obviously the defense was the big question mark during the offseason, is that there's appeared to be a team that only gave up 17 points on the road in an overtime game. You mentioned the muff punt for the one short field that they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. The defensive backs seemed to be close in coverage, breaking up passes. They just seem to be tighter on that side of the football against a quality opponent than they have been in a long time.
I was genuinely impressed in that game, starting with the pass rush. I mean, obviously, they just were killing Keaton Slovis to the point where they injured the kid, unfortunately for him. But then, in that second half with the backup, they even injured him. They got to the quarterback so much that they injured two different quarterbacks in that game. And they were just in those kids' faces on every single play. It's not going to be that easy with Anthony Richardson in Florida. He's far more mobile, although it's kind of the rumor has been that he's battling an ankle injury. I think he even said that himself in the postgame against USF. That's kind of why he hasn't been as mobile. Might be an excuse, might be real. I don't know. You take it however you want to. But it's not going to be that easy. He's far better than you've seen so far in terms of running the football. And that's scary to me because last year, I mean, running quarterbacks ruined this team, Tennessee. That Ole Miss game, I think, Matt Corral, I don't even know it felt like he ran for 1,000 yards against Tennessee in that game. They couldn't, for the life of them, they could not stop that kid. And so I'm pretty scared about what might happen if Richardson gets going on the ground. But I would also say Akron this last week, they had a pretty mobile quarterback, and they just were smashing him. I mean, they smoked that kid. So obviously it's Akron. The talent level is not going to be the same. But, at least you can look and be like, hopefully it's better than last year. You have a set of linebackers, in my opinion. Hopefully to spy them, and your defensive ends are essentially the same. Your interior defensive line is pretty inexperienced, and you're really using some depth pieces there more than really reliable guys who have a lot of experience. But ultimately, I think keep him under 75 yards rushing on the ground. I think that's a win for Tennessee here. Just don't let him go for 150, 2 touchdowns on the ground, just really blow you up. Just don't let that happen. And I think they'll be all right. I would be happy with a performance like that where, he's going to get his, but just don't let him ruin your night, essentially.
Charlie Burris joining us, Big Orange Podcast. Check it out. And please give us a like here at the Voice of College Football and subscribe. So who are the guys on defense getting the job done? Anybody popped in the first 3 games that is a bit unexpected?
Yeah. I think the primary among them that has really impressed fans is Aaron Beasley. He's a linebacker. And that linebacker position was kind of tentative coming into the season. The depth chart before the season started listed him and another kid, Juwan Mitchell, as kind of an either or. Turns out that Beasley's really the number one guy. He's been flying all over the field, really making nice plays. I think he's a smarter linebacker. Not to say that Tennessee's linebackers have been stupid. His football IQ just seems high. A smarter linebacker than Tennessee has had in a while. I think, and I think that bodes well for keeping Richardson in the pocket, keeping him contained. I don't know who they'll use to potentially spy there, but I hope it's Beasley because last year it was Jeremy Banks who's there, linebacker Tennessee, but he could not, bless his heart, he couldn't do it. He just was not able to contain the quarterbacks last year. So, yeah, and then another's Amari Thomas, interior D-line. He was kind of he showed some last year, but really, I think is forming into a guy that Tennessee can rely on at that's and that's good. It's encouraging because you really didn't know what you were going to get at that position before the season started, and it's been nice to find somebody who's stepping up. Although they're still a little reticent with him. They're not putting him in there for every snap all game long. But other than that, I think it's just generally been I think the real win for Tennessee right now is that nobody has been a complete disappointment, which is huge because last year you just had guys that were just getting roasted at times. And you've been borderline that with the defensive back, Warren Burrell. He was hurt in the game against Akron. He didn't play. He may be hurt this week too. We're not sure. But people were already calling for his backup because he was easily the weakest link on that defense. But even he was not playing horrifically. I would say I've seen far worse from Tennessee defensive backs in the past. And so I think, yes, you've had those standout players, but almost the real win is almost more that you haven't had guys totally falling apart, because with this system, that's very possible. So that's the way that I would put it, I think.
Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt are the two big targets, obviously, in the passing game. The rushing attack seems to be a three-headed committee of backs getting the football. If you've been pleased with that playmaking from the outside and at the running back spot.
Yeah, you have the factor this week in particular with injuries that makes this interesting. You got Akron for whatever reason, and I think this is just low life stuff. And I don't know anything about Joe Moorhead, and I don't know that he was telling his players to do this, but it also seemed like he wasn't telling them not to do this. These guys were gunning at Tennessee's legs in this Akron game. Akron knows they're coming in to get their head beat in. And to have guys that are flying off the handle and coming at the legs of players who were playing, at the upper echelon of college football. And, it's something where, like, for Hendon Hooker, if he were to have a devastating knee injury, you're affecting his life, his money. Like, this kid's trying to get to the NFL. And if you're just some team that's getting paid to be there and get waxed, and you're coming at this kid's knees, you're coming at his money. And I find that really despicable, frankly. And Akron was doing this kind of across the board. It wasn't just with Hendon Hooker. They injured from all of this, an injury to Cedric Tillman, Tennessee's number one wide receiver, day to day, to Jabari Small, number one running back, day to day, and to Dylan Sampson, who's the number 3 running back, but who has been really effective so far. He's, even as the number 3 running back, has looked really effective, and I've loved that. And so you're contending with that. All 3 of those guys might not be 100% this week, and that's not great. But you do have really great talent regardless. Transfer Brew McCoy at the wide receiver spot is huge and has looked really solid so far. Just hasn't gotten tons of touches yet, but has really showed that he can be a and then Jalen Wright, the running back position, in my personal opinion, he should probably be the number 1 running back. I think the only reason he hasn't been is because he's been a little turnover prone. He fumbled twice in 2 games in the first 2 games of Tennessee's season, which is terrible. But then against Akron, I I almost think it's without question that he should be the number one dude if he can get that ball security down. If he can hang on to the football, he's easily the guy with the most up in that run back. So and then on in the wide receiver spot also, I would be very remiss to not mention Jalen Hyatt also, who has totally exploded this season. He's showing a crazy amount of development, and it's been really great to see that too. And credit to everybody involved, position coaches, Heupel. I mean, some of these guys have just shown that they've taken giant steps forward. Jalen Hyatt is another one. So if Tillman, God forbid, he has to be out, I think play. He just may not be 100%. But God forbid he's out. You got guys. You do still have that talent. I mean, there's no way to understate that it's not going to be great to not have one of the best wide receivers in America out there on the field for you. Like, that just is what it is. So it's a little bit long-winded, but that's coming into this game specifically. That's kind of where Tennessee is at those skill positions.
I think a lot of people across America that remember Brew McCoy being one of the top recruits in college football coming out of high school, and of course at USC, not at USC, at USC, and back and forth and all over the place when he caught a touchdown against Pitt. I know that, got my radar up on, okay, Brew McCoy, he's playing, he's there, he's getting targets.
I would really point out that was great to see that he got enough involvement to get a touchdown pass, but really the play of the season so far for him was Tennessee on 3rd and long. He gets the ball him at the sideline about 3 yards behind the sticks, and he takes has the defender right in front of him, takes a step back, readjusts, and then lunges forward to get the first down. And it was huge. I mean, it was a play where kind of the momentum was turning if you ended up punting there, and it just, things weren't looking so hot. And he said he took that ball and just went, I'm getting this first down. And he went and he got it. And that was the play where I looked and went like, oh, this guy might be a dog. He really has some good fight in him, on top of just being a guy who can, he's huge and can fight really effectively for a 50-50 ball and stuff like that. I think, you saw that with Jauan Jennings in the past with Tennessee. Like, he wasn't the biggest guy, he wasn't the fastest guy, but he had that dog in him. He could, when he got the ball in his hands, you knew some magic was about to happen. And hopefully if Brew McCoy could be some semblance of that, just even like a fraction of what we found with Jauan Jennings, that would be amazing. Because frankly, Jeremy Pruitt owes an entire 8-win season to Jauan Jennings. So that would be an awesome development if Brew turns out to be something like that.
Small and Sampson each have 3 touchdowns.